Hey guys, welcome to Face with Terrence Weaver. I'm Terrence. I am super excited about this episode that we're going to talk about today. This guy has been a friend of a friend of a family. You know, I'm kind of like best friends to a person that you're going to see a little bit later. But she read my book, and we got to talking about my story. And as the readers and the viewers know, my story with Face to Face, where I took the gun and I had a very intimate segment with the gun due to the traumatic things that happened in my past. But this next person we're going to bring on set with us is going to talk about his session, his battle, his struggle, his entanglement with life and some of the things that happen. And Cleary is here with me, and we're going to bring Zach on. Hey, Zach, how are you doing?
Doing well, Terrence. Nice. Thanks for having me here today.
No, thank you for coming. And what I want the viewers to do is to get to understand who Zach is. So if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, Zach, and where you're from, you know, your family structure, and just kind of lead into where you want to go from there.
All right. So my name is Zachary Cole. I'm 29 years old. And born in Missouri, but I grew up in Hendersonville, Tennessee, just outside Nashville. I have both my parents still alive, and I have an older sister of 2 years that she's great. That I'm really close to all of them, and
Okay.
then of course my extended family on my mom's side, I'm really close with all of them, and they all live in Missouri where I was born. So
I almost think that everybody has a build up to a point that they're about to break. Can you take us there?
um, yeah, so in the fall of 2011, I was in college, and I had a period of time where I just completely broke down with grief that I hadn't processed yet from my uncle's passing in December of the year before. And then that bout of depression caused me to just stop going to my classes entirely. Um, so for 2 weeks, I didn't go at all. Then I tried going back one day and then realized I was so far behind and wouldn't be able to catch up. And so then I just stopped going completely. And of course, I then dropped out, and then I went back to working at Wendy's where I'd worked before.
Okay, and this uncle that died, was it suicide or
It was
what was?
just natural causes. I think it was sleep apnea. It was real sudden. None of us saw it coming. It was just one day he was completely fine, and then the next day he was gone.
Okay.
Um,
Was he
so
special to you? Was it your mom's brother? Or?
it was my mom's brother, and he was at the time probably my favorite member of the family.
Okay.
Um, just because he was always the one that made me feel like I was acknowledged there, but he also would always make everyone have a good time
Okay.
wherever they were at. He always made sure everybody was enjoying themselves,
The life of the party.
however it needed to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then so when he passed, I remember we got the news on a Friday morning, and I was it was right before finals for the semester of my senior year, so I couldn't miss school. So I still had to go to school that day, and then me and my dad came up the next day, while my mom and sister came up the day before, right after they got the news. Then the funeral was on a Sunday, and then I was back home by Monday, and
Okay.
so it was just all real quick. And I remember I was trying to stay strong for my mom and my sister
Yeah.
to be the support that they needed. And so I just never took the time to process the grief for myself.
Yeah. Sometimes that weight's a little heavy because we all
Yeah.
feel like we have to be strong for somebody.
Yeah. And so then when it did finally hit, it hit hard. So I dropped out of college. I went back to Wendy's just thinking, have a job, be doing something, be a productive member of society in whatever way I can. And while I was at Wendy's, eventually I was asked to become a manager
Mhm.
because my boss saw some potential in me there. So I went, became a manager, and of course that comes with a lot more stress than just normal grunt work does. And so then that mixed with closing was already giving me a bunch of stress and what felt like no energy to do anything when I wasn't working. And then one day my general manager called me and was just like, hey, would you be interested in moving in with one of our closers so that he doesn't have to move to Atlanta? And I was just like, maybe when would this need to happen by? And she says Friday, and it was Tuesday at the time, so it was very short notice.
3 days.
Yeah, basically. And so that day I met up with him, and then we went and found an apartment that would take us on such short notice and had the place available. And the next day we were planning on starting the moving process. And
Had you lived outside of your...
other
Parents
than
before?
living in the dorm room in college, no, I'd always been at my parents' house.
So that was like a big...
Yeah, it was a big change on top of all the other stress I'd been going through. And then it just all came together and it felt unbearable at one point. And so then that's kind of what led me to make the decision.
Okay. And how long was that after your uncle passed? From to that Friday?
So, math is hard. I want
you
to
say,
say
like,
it was
2
like
weeks, 3
a
weeks, a
year and
month?
6 months
A year and 6 months?
between him passing and me pulling
To
the
that
trigger.
Okay.
Yeah. So I remember he was at the start of December in 2010, and then this was, I guess it was longer. This was 2013 that it happened, and it was May. So I guess it was closer to 2.5 years.
Okay.
It's hard for me to remember. That was all kind of
Yeah.
a blur,
No.
anyways, before all this. So
let me make sure I have this straight. Your uncle passed, a couple years earlier. You kind of dealt with it, walking through this, I'm gonna say darkness. This depression, and then on top of that, you have your promotion, the stress from being the manager, but also the process of moving. And this is your first time actually staying outside your mom's house, besides being in the dorm.
Yeah.
And with dorms, you just kind of check out and check back in, and come back home for the summer, and it wasn't mentally, to me, it wasn't like a actual move from a dorm. You're just kind of checking in, checking out. You still got a place at home.
yeah,
right?
It was like a hotel stay.
Yeah. So
But
now you're
it
really
always
about to
feels
disconnect.
temporary.
Yeah.
So this was going to be the first time I was going to be on my own, in a sense, without my parents being right there, just down the hall, if I needed them for something.
Yeah.
And so
let me ask you this: right before we get to the event, and you telling us the details of your event, as you was going through this, did anybody know?
no. Well, I say no. It's one of those things that nobody that would have suspected would have thought I was being serious about it. Because allegedly, and I don't remember this, but allegedly the night before, I was asking my closers while I was working, hey, if you were going to kill yourself, how would you do it? And apparently they all collectively agreed with me in saying gun to the head would be the best way to do it. Now, I don't remember this conversation happening.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was one of those, like, I was just being silly and making conversation and trying to pick a topic that was different than the normal, or if it was me genuinely considering it and just, like, trying to seek confirmation.
So hold on, let me get this correct. You asked your coworkers
Yes. One of them who I was supposed to move in with.
if someone was going to kill themselves, how would they do it? And none of them thought
Right,
to even...
because up until that point, I had been completely fine as far as they could see. Because I was the guy that always had a smile on his face. I was always working hard. I was always trying to make sure other people were doing good, having a good time, whatever. So nobody suspected, even with that question, because I didn't show any of the stereotypical signs of it.
And you say stereotypical, right, with air quotes, because is there a way that we can kind of, like, in one large group identify somebody who might be considering suicide? Like, there's not like this one, that they did this, so now we know, right? It's not easy
Right.
to tell, because a lot of people don't, I think, like you
A lot of
mentioned the
people
other
don't
day,
advertise it.
right? And they might not even appear
Right.
like they're depressed or
But
sad.
then you have, TV and media that portrays it as it's this person who's really sad, really lonely, whatnot, keeping to themselves, might have violent tendencies, whatever. You know, so there's like this stereotype that Hollywood portrays as this person's suicidal and is going to kill themselves, even though that's not really accurate to how, in my experience, people who are suicidal actually act. You know, it's just they have to have the one way to portray it so that the audience knows what to be looking for, even if it's not actually accurate to real life.
Yeah. No, even with me, I went about my daily routines. I even went to church, and I couldn't stay in church long. I felt like I became very fidgety. I couldn't be still. I felt like I'm sitting in the middle of a room, and the room is spinning around me. No matter where I went, I couldn't stay there long because I couldn't focus because I was so hurt and so depressed. I felt like alone time. But in honesty, I think that was the last thing that I needed. But I don't know about you and your experience.
I mean, at the time, I was almost a stereotypical loner in that I kept to myself. I didn't really go out for anything unless I was invited. And even then, I might still not say yes. I'd stay home, watch movies, play video games, whatever, which, to be fair, I still do that now, but now I'm more social in the meantime. But yeah, I was the guy that anytime I wasn't at work was probably just alone time anyways.
Okay.
Just because I didn't really have what I thought were friends at the time. Like, it was just a bunch of people I know that I would call my friends, but we never really did anything other than just exchange a friendly word every so often.
Yeah.
It seems like you just didn't feel connected, and you felt maybe like you were like you didn't have a way out of this move, right? You felt kind of did you feel obligated to do that?
I did, because if I didn't move in with him and get him an apartment before the end of the week, he was going to have to move down
It's a lot of pressure.
south. Yeah, and so we were at a point where we couldn't really afford to lose a closer without making life so much harder on the managers and the other closers. And so I was trying to help avoid that, and I had toyed with the idea of moving out of my parents' house because I guess I was 20 at the time. You know, it was kind of past time in my mind that I should have already moved out on my own, if for no other reason than just to say that I've moved out of my parents' house. And so it seemed like a good opportunity, if maybe a little rushed. But I did still feel that obligation based on work that, like, I needed to go ahead and do this,
Yeah, it
just
seems
so
like
that, you know, everything else would work out okay.
So in the life of Zach Cole, on that day, paint the picture for us. Where were you at? Who was there? Where everybody was?
So I was at home alone. My sister was at work.
At home at your new place?
Yes. Or no, at home at my parents' house.
Okay.
Because we hadn't actually moved yet. So I was at my parents' house alone. My sister was at work. I was supposed to close that night at Wendy's, but it wasn't a point in time where I was worried about that. And so I remember what I did was I went out to the garage to where my mom's truck was, because they were on vacation, but they had taken my dad's vehicle, and I knew she had just gotten her carry permit for her sidearm, and so I knew she kept it in the truck. So I went out to the truck, and I sat in the passenger seat, and I pulled out the gun.
And where were your parents? I'm sorry, I may have
They
missed
were
that.
in Florida at this point because they were on vacation.
Okay.
So they were a good 12 hours away.
Okay.
And so I pulled out the gun, and I remember I spent a long time just staring at it, you know, just holding it in my lap, staring down at it. And then I started to go back and forth between staring at it and holding it up to my chin.
So what type of gun was this? Do you know?
I couldn't tell you other than a pistol.
Okay.
So it was a mixture of, do I want to do this? Yes, I do. Well, no, I don't. Yes, I do. Well, do I really?
All because of those items that led you up 2 years prior and all of the pressure that you had.
Right. So I didn't see a way out from the pressure and the misery that I'd been sitting in, even if I didn't consciously know that I was in misery. It was just one of those, like, I'm just sad all the time. I feel overworked, overstressed, whatever. And then I remember I was doing that back and forth for 20, 30 minutes. And then the next thing I knew, it was days later and I was in the hospital.
So where did you have the gun placed?
So if we're assuming this is the gun, I held it like this. And I just pulled the trigger and it went straight up. And took out my nose because I can't smell anymore.
So hold on. You pulled the trigger. And what happened?
It went through, I know it went through my mouth because there's still a hole in my tongue. And then it took out the inner workings of my nose because I can't smell anymore. Somehow went through both eyes, like between both eyes, not like through the eyes individually, but it went between the eyes and then came out right around here. You know, and so it was basically just almost a straight up dead center shot.
So how are you sitting here in front of us today?
That's a question I don't feel qualified to answer because I'm not a doctor.
So you pulled the trigger
Basically,
in the truck by yourself, and what happened?
So immediately I passed out because, of course, your body's not going to take some sort of trauma like that immediately and not, you know, lose consciousness. Apparently, and this is all secondhand knowledge because I don't remember any of this, but apparently I woke up sometime later, got out of the truck, made my way towards the kitchen to start cleaning myself up because I could apparently tell I was a bloody mess. At some point during that, I passed out again. And then, apparently, one of my co-managers from Wendy's came to my house and found me like that because she was concerned that I didn't show up for work without sending any sort of text message or phone call or anything like that. And
So were you hours late?
I don't know.
Days late?
It wasn't days. I know that.
No, because you were supposed to close that night.
Right. I was supposed to close that night and I hadn't shown up, and that was abnormal for me. So they.
Because I was going to say, I've never had a manager come to my house if I was late.
Yeah,
Like 15,
so-
20,
I
an
haven't
hour or
either,
two.
but I feel like that's because they're like, Cleary, you know, she did it again. You know,
Yeah, me
like
too.
Right.
I wasn't the most like.
And I had
Responsible.
I
no
worked at
history.
fast food places, and you know, I don't know if I had.
I
that
had
commitment.
no history of no call, no shows
Wow.
ever, and so
They knew it was like.
they
something
knew
was
that
up.
there's something going on if I just didn't show up for my shift, especially when I didn't answer the phone.
Okay.
And so she looked up my address and she came to my house. And initially she knocked, rang the doorbell, but the doorbell didn't work at the time, so it wouldn't have done her any good anyways. She knocked a bunch, didn't get a response, and she went out to my truck, and apparently she left a note that she put like on my windshield or just like stuck it to my driver's side window or something, saying something to the effect of, Zach, I don't know why you think you can just not come into work and get away with it, but just know that you can't come back if you don't call us or
Wow.
something. And then she also was calling or texting a friend of mine who told her if his truck is there, he's home. Go knock on his door until he answers you.
So
She just had your friend's phone number, or you guys.
So
were
we
all
were all
friends?
co-workers.
Oh, coworkers. Okay.
So she was about to leave, wrote the note, text your friend, and the friend said, "Don't leave. He got to be there. Go back
Right.
and continue to be on the door till he comes."
Right. And so that's when
Wow.
she went back, she started knocking again, and that's when I apparently answered the door. She took one look at me and asked me, well, Zach, who beat the shit out of you?
You were standing.
Yeah. I was standing. I was a bloody, beat up mess already. I'm sure my face was all swollen. And I tried to pass it off to her as it was just a nosebleed. Because I had chronic nosebleeds at the time. But,
So you were trying to tell her that it was just, you didn't want her to know.
So
You just
I
wasn't
don't-
aware.
I don't know if
Possibly.
I was aware at the time. I think my body was in shock and went
Yeah.
with the most obvious conclusion, which would be I got another nosebleed. But so I answered the door for her. I tried to pass off as a nosebleed. she didn't believe me because she grew up in kind of the ghetto part of her area, so she knew what it looked like when somebody was beaten up versus what just a normal nosebleed looks like.
Right.
So she didn't believe me, and so she asked me to call my mom. So then I apparently went upstairs to my room, got my phone, came back downstairs, dialed my mom's number, and handed her the phone. She talks to my mom for a minute. My mom tells her, go next door, get our neighbor, and he'll know what to do. So she went next door, got the neighbor. He came over. He took one look at me and he called 911
Wow.
because he knew that I was not having a nosebleed and that was something more serious.
Yeah.
So then they rushed me to the hospital. And again, I have no memory of this myself. This is all secondhand that people have told me. They ended up taking me to Vanderbilt Medical Center. After spending 5 minutes at the local hospital, they life-flighted me to Vanderbilt. And the next thing I was aware of, it was a couple days later. But apparently right after they got me into the ambulance to take me to the local hospital is when my sister got home for the day from her job, and she basically got enough out of the police or paramedics or whatever to know what was going on. So then she rushed to the local hospital. She got there just in time for them to say that they had just life-flighted me at Vanderbilt. So then she made the 30-minute drive to Nashville, and she was the only member of the family I had there.
So how far was Nashville from where you?
It was about 30 minutes,
Okay.
give or take, depending on traffic and time of day. And so
So let me make sure I have this. Did they flight you from your house, or they flighted you from?
they life-flighted me from the local hospital,
Gotcha.
which was, I'm going to assume for an ambulance, is about 5-7 minutes away, because they're allowed to just speed and get past everybody. For me, it would be about 10 minutes. But so they got me to the local hospital, and basically, I'm going to assume on the way there, they made the decision that they couldn't take care of me. And then basically immediately put me onto the helicopter and got me to Vanderbilt, which was about 20 miles away. So I don't know how fast helicopters go, but, wasn't that long. But I have no memory of any of this.
Wow.
So we're at the hospital. Can we take a quick break?